for a lot of people, this time of year is the perfect time. You get a little bit of break in the weather. It's spring training time. Major League Baseball is back after an insanely entertaining World Series. We're going to talk baseball. Joining me today is Christian Huggins, one of the outstanding stand up pitchers at Queens University. The guy throws 90 plus miles an hour and throws some mean sidearm nastiness at you. And he and I are going to discuss this coming Major League Baseball season, some of the news that's been associated with baseball recently, and we're going to talk about how sports, and specifically how baseball, can be beneficial in the life of a young person. So, without any more time being wasted, play ball and let's go. Today on Voices, I am privileged and pleasured to have a person that I think very highly of, and it's about a specific sport that I once had a greater passion for, but it's less, but I love sports the same, and that's baseball. Today joining me is Christian Huggins, and he is a baseball expert in my opinion. He plays baseball on the collegiate level, and he's played baseball in different arenas. And so, Christian, I want to thank you for joining me today. And I feel like no person can do a better introduction for themselves than themselves. So I'll leave the floor to you.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I was excited. So I'm Christian Huggins. I play Division II baseball at Queens University of Charlotte. I've also played JUCO, played club baseball, done the high school, done the Legion. So I'm definitely not an expert, but I can give a lot of my thoughts.
Well, I would give you a degree of expertise, because if we look at the social media stratosphere, most of the people who have opinions about baseball on what managers should and shouldn't do and what players should and shouldn't do, a lot of these people have never played on a collegiate level. None of them, a few of them could see a fastball if they were standing at the plate to face it, or
Mm-hmm.
throw one. So I think it does give you a level of expertise because of the competition that you've had the opportunity, based on your talent, to face, and and the fact that you obviously have to have knowledge of the game. So it does take you to a sort of different echelon with other people. We're not belittling anyone, but I'm saying I feel like you probably have a pretty good feel of what's going on with baseball in general, with Major League Baseball as what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about today. So specifically, the spring training just started. And with spring training having just started, I myself am a baseball guy. I'm from New York. I love to watch the Yankees. My personality changes when I watch the Yankees, but I'm also super duper biased. And I know everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people hate the Yankees because it's the evil empire, et cetera, et cetera. And so for you, Christian, what's your history with baseball?
So I started playing, I believe it was either 5 or 6 years old. So I've been playing about 16 years now. I was always a Braves fan. We tried to go to as many games as we could. My grandfather was a Yankees fan. So we would always walk into his house. First thing we would do was start doing the Braves chop at him. And he hated it. He was a huge Yankees fan, still is. But it's funny, the stadium that we're building for my college program is the same field or the same park that I started playing baseball at when I was 6.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it just comes full circle.
And so, what was your sort of feelings about how last year's season ended? We'll talk about the controversial part a little bit later. But how did you feel about how the year ended last year? Because that World Series was absolutely bonkers, man.
Well, so I mean, it's tough for me looking back at it now because I'm a Braves fan. I didn't want the Nationals to win, and then you mentioned the controversial part with the Astros. So now I'm glad that they won, but it seems like this year's the same guys, the same players, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Astros, that are the team to beat. But I think last season was Well, I think it's bigger for baseball. Baseball gets a bad rap sometimes. Not getting viewership or whatever. But I think it's on the up.
Well, I think one of the issues that baseball suffers from, and I use that word lightly, is the length of the season. And because the season is, well, it basically goes from March, April until November, and all the other sports have shorter seasons and they have less games. So it's easier to sort of keep up with the ADD sort of modern American culture. So I think that's something that it suffers from. But when they're highlights in baseballs, they're really good highlights, right?
Yeah, of course. I like to say they're the best athletes on the planet. I'm sure a lot of other people would argue with me.
Well, no, because the thing about it, baseball, well, the first thing I think that is amazing is sort of just the hand-eye coordination you have to play baseball. And it really separates the men from the boys, so to speak, when you're able to sort of play on an advanced level, because the ability to hit, I mean, people don't understand how difficult it is to hit a ball with a bat. Like they don't even
Yeah.
understand the challenge in that.
The funny thing is going on Twitter and like seeing the dads that are like, why don't they just hit the ball? I mean, it's like that 95-mile-per-hour fastball looks the exact same out of the hand as an 80-mile-per-hour changeup. You have no shot.
And the thing about it is not only that, is that, I mean, now I know obviously you've played baseball long enough where you hit and you are a pitcher, so it's so the mentality is there for both ends. But like, I don't think people understand what it's like to stand in the box knowing that a 90-mile-an-hour thing is coming at you. Like, I don't think they understand like what's necessary to be successful dealing with that.
Yeah, there's a reason I'm a pitcher now and I'm not hitting anymore because I couldn't. There's a point where you just can't see the ball and you're just swinging, hoping it hits it. It's definitely a skill that obviously very few have. Um, I'd say it's a little different than creating a jump shot that is pretty consistent and like I don't know how to explain it. It's just like it's something that you just got to do.
And the thing is that you got to do it, but most people can't do it. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the part that makes it just so amazing. Because like I went to a Yankees game. Yeah, no, I went to a Yankees game last year. I was in New York in the summer, and I think they were playing. I think they were playing Kansas City. And whenever I go to New York, I always go back to the Cathedral, because Yankee Stadium, the new one, the house that Jeter built, so to speak, is the same but different. And just watching the ball leave the pitcher's hand and get to the mound in a millisecond, and not seeing the ball at all, and just understanding like the guy is standing there. It doesn't matter how big the batter is. He can be 5'5", he can be 6'5". They get your wrists snapped around and your waist turned. It's like an art. So yeah, I agree. There's an
Yeah.
athlete dimension to that I don't think people can understand. So for you, like, what's your passion for baseball? Like, what makes baseball it for you? Because, like, as you said, we've known each other for a while, so I know you have and had the capability to play other sports at a pretty good level as well. So what made baseball be the sport for you?
I think for me it's the whole process. Obviously everybody talks about when you're on the field or the court or wherever, you forget the rest of life. You forget about the homework you got to do or the tests you have. But the process in baseball is like it's so continual that you almost don't have time to stop and think about anything else. And I compare it to like seeing a therapist. So like you go and see the therapist and you feel good after you do it. And then if you stop the therapy for a little bit and then you realize that you probably still need to be doing that therapy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What's interesting about it is uh sports, I think, I don't know, I would say sports in general, because I think women athletes sort of feel it too, is there's an adrenaline that happens to individuals who like a sport and are good at it that makes the sport more gratifying than we can imagine as like observers. And so I can get the therapy part you're talking about. That's I never heard it that way, but that's a very interesting way to describe it.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm playing baseball and another sport is because that's the one I was better at. I'm not going to play a sport I'm bad at just because that hurts my pride too much.
And we're all about sort of self-preservation anyway, so that
Yeah.
that makes the most sense anyways. So I get that. And so, like, if you were looking at like a baseball player that you would model yourself after, or you not even model yourself, but you admired, maybe one or two or three that you would say, hey, I want to either emulate what they do, or I kind of am similar to them. Who would you say sort of fits that mold for you?
Well, my role model growing up was always Chipper Jones, third baseman for the Braves, because I think he was so consistent. And he was a switch hitter, and he batted like, I think it was like 280 or 290 from both sides. But it's how do you play 162 games and are that consistent for like 15 years?
It is
There's
amazing.
it
It is
it
amazing.
it says something about like who they are and their commitment and their perseverance, and especially in baseball too, where you don't like get drafted and immediately start. There's such a whole process to it, and I think I relate to especially what he went through. Um, and a pitcher, I really like Michael Lorenzen. He's a pitcher for the Reds. He's a guy who's like pretty transparent about his workouts and stuff like that. Marcus Stroman is another good one, who's like a I think he's like 5'9" guy. He's super short, but he's like he's super passionate, and you can tell, and it shows up in his game.
And it's interesting. That's another thing about baseball, is that height is irrelevant. Like its ability. Because I'm trying to. I forget who it is. He was like 5'7", and he might have been like a buck 50 wet man, but he was one of the best baseball players at his position for a period. I can't remember the name, because I want to say it's Knobloch, but I don't think it was Knobloch. It's somebody else. But so baseball, actually, it allows you, the ball and the stick thing makes it an equalizer, because if you can play the field, or you can pitch the ball, or you can hit the ball, then you can play the game.
Well, you can talk about Altuve. His story is he showed up to an MLB tryout. They didn't even let him walk on the field the first day because they're like, this guy's too small. Like, it's not going to happen. They sent him home. He came back the next day and immediately signed a contract, and now he's like one of the best second basemen in the game.
And I love those stories, and that's why I also wanted to make sure I talked about baseball, because in previous podcasts I talked about college football, I talked about NCAA basketball for a little bit, the NBA, NFL, and baseball is one of my originals, because when growing up in New York, I used to play like wiffle ball in the street or stick ball, and I mean it's different, because like baseball has a totally different sort of demeanor now, but I still think it's an amazing game. Being a Yankees fan, like Giancarlo is a huge, huge deal to me. And so with that, let's just jump into the baseball season in itself. So a review. So you're a Braves fan. What did you think about how the Braves did last year, and what you expect from them this year?
Oh, dude, man, they keep getting stuck though. They win the division and then they get knocked out right after in the division series, and they have the potential. They have Freddie Freeman, they have Ronald Acuna, Ozzy Albies. They have all these guys that can put it together, but they just don't quite get there, which is, I mean, a lot of teams. But my expectation for this year is at least 90 wins. That's probably a lot, but it's just as a Braves fan, and I'm probably lucky to be a Braves fan more than a fan of another team. But I want to see them put it together.
And the interesting thing about it is I remember, like, for instance, the Nationals won the World Series, but like a couple of years ago, like the Nationals have been sort of up and down too, where they've had an inconsistency. Because I know there was a time when Strasburg was hurt and he wasn't sort of able to produce what he was producing early on. And so for them to win last year, especially as a wild card, was a pretty big deal. So it moving away from the Braves and just sort of looking at a review of last year, like what team surprised you the most last year?
The Immediately the Twins and the Rays. The Twins like set the major league home run record for a single season, and the Rays just got stuck in there with the Yankees, and the Red Sox in that division. But they both of those teams are like teams you wouldn't think about being powerhouses, and then came out and won. I think they won. The Rays won like 96 games, something like that. The Twins won a lot too. So both of those, they surprised me for last year.
And just looking at like last year's sort of playoffs where you had Tampa Bay and Oakland in the wild card, and then the Yankees and Houston were sort of battling for that top seed, and then Houston eventually got it. And then you move into the playoffs where, and as a Yankees fan, when they played Houston, the pitching was so much better for that Houston team that as a Yankees fan, it was hard to just kind of go in there and be okay with that. But I mean, like the Braves last year, they're in the playoffs. It was disappointing for them to lose to the Cardinals, but then for the Cardinals to then lose to Washington sort of in dominating fashion, and for that World Series to be the way it was in a pretty amazing sort of series. So, are you expecting the Braves to make the playoffs again this year?
Yeah, 100%. I know there's a lot of everybody's betting on the Nats to come back again. They're even the Mets to have a good season, but I don't. Man, the Braves have such a good core and had been doing it together for past couple of years that there's something to be said about that culture as opposed to just signing a big check and giving it to a guy. So I fully expect them to make the playoffs.
You know, what's funny is it's just talking about sort of signing a check. It gives a good transition to sort of free agency. There's all kind of different free agents. Like, for instance, the Yankees signed the check to get their free agent
Mm-hmm.
because pitching was a big deal for them. And I mean, even though it makes sense, because even though CC Sabathia wasn't what who he was in the past, that the Yankees didn't really have an ace anymore, and so they needed one. And so that signing made sense. But the one I really want to talk about, the most recent one, is the trade uh, that went down with the Dodgers and the Red Sox. Like, that's huge, and a lot of people in baseball are upset about that because the Red Sox have money, so they could have paid him, even though they were saying they didn't want to pay that contract he wanted. But what do you think about that trade? Because that kind of changes the NL, because they're kind of heavy now. Even though David Price came and he's a little long in the tooth, he still adds to their rotation.
Yeah, so that trade was it revolved around Mookie and David Price because Price is such a huge contract. The Red Sox have been wanting to get rid of that contract. So, I mean, my take on it is you only have Mookie for the Dodgers have Mookie for 1 year under contract. Then he's free to sign with anybody else. So the return that the Red Sox got for Mookie was good. I thought I thought both the Red Sox and the Dodgers won that trade equally. Dodgers are such a win now team, and then Red Sox got a good prospect in Jeter Downs, who they needed a middle infield guy.
And it's just interesting because even though people don't necessarily put the Dodgers sort of on the same, uh, I guess, level of hatred or universally as the Yankees, the Dodgers are functioning very much how the Yankees were functioning before, just spending all the money they can to get what they want. The difference is the Yankees actually got more results. But I think that for some, uh, it's interesting to see what happens with that Dodgers team, especially with what happened with the Nats. St. Louis is always sort of there. but also the Giants. Like the Giants are so up and down. Like you never know what you're gonna get from them. So
Mm-hmm.
they maybe they'll be good this year, maybe they won't. But with that, like if we're looking at the season before we go into the season, how much do you think this cheating scandal that the Astros have been now penalized for affects this coming season?
I think it's a mindset thing with other teams. So it just came out today actually that Mike Fiers, who was the one who came out on the Athletic and said the Astros were cheating and all this stuff. It came out that the Athletics had actually filed a complaint before to the MLB before they released that article, and there's going to be a lot of tension when they're playing the Astros. I don't know if guys are going to get hit, but there's a good shot that they do. I don't think it'll affect the rest of MLB, but when you're playing the Astros, I think you got a vendetta against them. You're playing your best guys.
And the conversation that I've heard, because I mean, baseball is a pretty old-fashioned, traditional kind of game. A lot of the responses I heard from people, we've always stolen signs in baseball. We've always done that. So what makes you think? What makes you feel like this one was that much bigger compared to sort of the traditionalist sort of view of baseball? Like, what made this Astros thing worse?
It's the fact that they had a display in their dugout tunnel where they had their own camera set up in center field, and then they had this display in their dugout to where they could read the catcher's signs. And I saw a video of Trevor Bauer, pitcher for the Reds, talking about it, and he was like, there's a fine line where cheating is okay in baseball, or stealing signs, I should say, and then where it becomes cheating. I think once you start involving any electronics, it's cheating. And the whole possible buzzers on their jersey while they're at bat, if that comes to light that they were wearing buzzers, I think they should be banned from baseball.
What's weird, and I mean, like both you and I are too young to like sort of have firsthand knowledge of the playing days, but what this issue did with the Astros actually brought back up the issue about Pete Rose being eligible to go into the Hall of Fame, because the story behind Pete Rose is he gambled on baseball, but he gambled on his own team.
Yeah.
And at the time, gambling in sport in general is frowned upon, and I don't know if it's illegal, but I'm pretty sure it's frowned upon within the organization. And so he has not been allowed to be into the Baseball Hall of Fame, as he still is the all-time he's the all-time hits leader. There's no one's going to catch him. So it's rough. And so there's people saying, well, if the Astros are able to just kind of get a slap on the wrist, which people think this penalty they've received is, then why not let Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame? So what do you think about sort of that parallel?
Well, it's like the reason it can't be in the Hall of Fame is because if you're banned for life, you can't be in the Hall of Fame. So you could talk about changing that rule about where you're banned for life, but you're still allowed in the Hall of Fame. And then you can talk about the steroids part of it too. Like, is Pete Rose banned for life for gambling, but these guys who use steroids aren't? Are they going to get in the Hall of Fame? Who knows? I mean, I think he has a good case. I'm one of those people who I think he should be in the Hall of Fame.
And it's weird because, like, for instance, just briefly to talk about the steroids thing, Barry Bonds is just sort of the face of that, right? Because Barry Bonds, we all know, all-time home run leader, whether he got that number legitimately or illegitimately is sort of irrelevant, because prior to him using, or him people believing when he started, Barry Bonds was a Hall of Fame player before he even had that.
Yeah.
So it does beg the question of how much steroids is going to play a role, because Roger Clemens is another one, all-time pitcher, all-time great. And again, he's sort of sullied by that same thing. And so you have a great field player, because Barry Bonds was an excellent field player. and batter. But then you have one of the greatest pitchers out there, and you're like, well, you're not going to let these guys in. I don't know. It's sort of I guess the unspoken ban that they have. So I think you do bring up a point about like, how do they balance that? Because like for those two guys, what would you think should what? Because they're eligible now, right? I think they're eligible now. Are they?
Yeah, they are.
And so
They
do you think they'll get in? I'm not going to ask you if you think they should, because that's sort of a judgment thing. But do you think they will?
I think they'll get in. Their percentages of votes that they're getting every year is going up, and I think I'm not sure how the voting system works specifically, but some of the old time voters are probably the ones saying no. So I think by the end of their eligibility to get in, they'll get in.
It's fair enough. So speaking of just all-time great players, let's talk about this coming season now. So what are some guys that you think are going to either bust out or stand out this year? Maybe Cy Young, MVP type guys in both leagues.
So some of the guys I had written down were, I mean, obviously the big name guys, the Trout, Mookie Betts, Anthony Rendon. I think one of the guys that will have a good sophomore year is Vladimir Jr. I think he'll have a good year. I think Garrett Cole will have a great year with the Yankees. Obviously, Ronald Acuna being a Braves guy. I mean, you can go back to Jacob deGrom with the Mets. There's a lot of guys who are supposed to have good years. I don't know. We'll see. Bauer with the Reds, Castellanos with the Reds. Talk about a team that made a lot of moves. But yeah, I think the cool thing about every baseball year is seeing which rookies get called up and how they do.
And that is exciting because those guys, because you have to know how long. You hope they can do it for a while, but you also want to know how long they could sustain that, because like you said earlier about Chipper Jones, and he's a perfect example, Hall of Fame guy. You have to do that for a long time, man. Like for the length of a baseball season it's whoa, you know? So yeah, I think that will be something. So sort of going more into the season, like if we're playing out like the season ending, like what teams do you think make the playoffs? Like what teams do you think make the playoffs in the National League and American League?
I think it's National League will go. I mean, Dodgers are going to probably win 100, 105 games. I think the Braves and Nats are going to be switching off between who wins the division and who's the wild card team. AL, you can go Yankees, Astros. I think the Twins will be back in there. Good shot the Rays will. I mean, it's a lot of the teams from last year too, man. But I think the Reds have a good shot at winning their division, and the White Sox might surprise some people too.
Okay, and so if you were going to pick representatives from the American League and the National League for the World Series, who do you think would come out of both?
God, the Braves fan to me wants to say Braves, but that Dodgers lineup, man, I don't know if anyone can beat them in the NL. And then I think you almost have to go Yankees in the AL.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
I'm joking. But and so if we're looking at that, there's another news story that's worthy of discussion. Is and I think I might have saw it from you on a Twitter feed, but they're talking about changing the Major League Baseball playoff seed, not seeding, but where they're going to allow, if I'm not mistaken, it's 7 teams in, and then the top seeds can pick who they want to play, and the number 1 seed gets a bye. If I'm not mistaken, that's how it works. But what do you think about that proposal?
It's too much. It's like the NBA, man. It's like where they play so many games and then all these teams get in, and it's like, why are we even playing the regular season? It's like it's 14 teams in the playoffs for baseball is a lot. And then MLB is doing the whole reality TV part of it where you pick the team. I mean, I understand they're trying to do something where they spark some interest. But I think it devalues the games a little too much.
Especially for how long the season is, because that makes the postseason push until like the end, towards the end of November, or you're going to end the season earlier, or you're going to start the season earlier. But it starts to push baseball into a time where you don't really want to see players playing in snow, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah,
And
no, they
go ahead.
like you mentioned before, they already got the issue. They're playing 162 games, and then MLB wants to do this so they get a little bit more ad revenue or revenue for more playoff games. I don't know.
And the thing about it is that's interesting is that baseball is still sort of a family centric game. You go to the park with your family, and you get the hot dogs and the whatever, and you sit down, because I mean that's how I remember, either going with like friends or with family. And if you do it that long, it's like you're kind of stretching the family as well too. And I don't know if that really works so much so. With that, like an interesting thing, because you are a baseball guy, and people look at baseball sort of in a different lens. What do you think you could do, or you would suggest to make baseball sort of uh, I guess I don't know if more appealing is the right word, but more, I guess, more appealing. Sort of more uh, desirable for like sort of the casual fan.
I think it more desirable for the casual fan. I feel like a lot of the issue, most baseball fans that I meet are people who played baseball growing up. And with football and basketball taking so many kids away from baseball, that we're seeing these people grow up and they're not baseball fans, so they don't watch the games. So I think the issue is almost a little bit on how you draw kids into playing baseball more than it is, the fan experience. I mean, obviously you can always improve the fan experience, but starting from a young age, I think, is where you get those fans.
And that makes sense. That makes total sense to me. So I have a few more questions left, and then I'll let you go. So one, you were talking about like most of the fans played baseball, and you play baseball, and you play at a high level. So a question I have is that when you started out playing baseball, obviously there's multiple positions. For you, if there's a fan who wants to like know more, they want to get their kid interested in baseball, like what position would you say is a good position to start playing, and how can they sort of develop the skill to become good, and then sort of develop the love for the game, in your opinion?
I think I'm a big shortstop guy growing up. That's what I played. I wouldn't ever recommend somebody starting off as a pitcher. They always say like play the field and then learn how to throw and then become a pitcher. So, if you're a shortstop or a center fielder, you're being an athlete in every play that you're making. And then later on in life, you figure out you want to be a pitcher. You already know how to throw, and you're an athlete at that point as well.
That makes sense. And so now we're switching to basically the 1-on-9 situation of being a batter. A friend of mine said this, and I never thought about it this way. He said baseball is the only sport where it's okay to fail more than you succeed, as long as you fail about a third. You succeed a third of the time, which you never think about that. You're successful if you bat like 300, which is on a professional level, which is
Yeah.
sort of mind blowing. And so while you don't necessarily have to step in the batter's box anymore, when you were there, like what's some sort of mechanisms or mentalities that you took when you went to the batter's box as you developed as a player, to sort of understand how to be sort of brave in the box, because it can be intimidating sometimes, but also to be successful there?
A lot of it is, like you mentioned, you fail most of the time, and you talk about how the all-time greats, you talk about the Michael Jordans and whoever else, they talk about how they got better because they failed. So if you're failing 7 out of 10 times, each one of those times is a learning experience. And then you talk about baseball is such a it's such a game within a game. You know, if I'm a pitcher, I have to win every pitch that I throw. If I don't win that pitch, it's you know, that ball is getting out of the park. They're hitting a home run off me. So each time you fail, 70% of the time or whatever it is, you're learning. So first pitch, if I get a curveball and I miss it, okay, what did he do to make me miss that? And then I say, okay, next pitch, and then you adjust.
And you know, that's interesting because if you think about that and you take that philosophy into life, it probably can help you deal with a lot of things in life as well. And I would guess like baseball kind of helps you mentally deal with things on, hey, man, I'm going to fail a lot of the times when I try, but I have to be happy with the successes that I get, even though it might
Mm-hmm.
be a third of the time. So another level, just sort of going on two more levels, is sort of just managing the game. While I know you're a player and you don't manage the game, as far as like managing, what do you think is necessary for being a player, for having a good manager and being able to relate to your players so you can get the most out of them in a game like baseball?
Well, there's such an art to it, I think, having a lot of different coaches. And it kind of relates to like being a manager in like the corporate world where the communication has to be there, the interest in your employees and your players have to be there. You have to be able to, you know, the processes that your business is going through has to be there. So you talk about creating matchups with a left-handed pitcher and a left-handed batter, communicating to the pitcher who's warming up, setting that lineup for the day. There's a lot that go into it, and I'm sure it's unreal at the professional level what the managers need to go through to get their players ready to get their respect.
Yeah, I could imagine that because, you know, I would guess baseball players who make it to advance on levels, not to say they have egos, but I'm sure there's a level of confidence they have from
Yeah.
making it that far that it might be a little difficult to deal with. So, just one more question, and that's sort of like, if for you, just sort of dreaming wise, right? We've talked about Major League Baseball. You've given your uh, vision of, you know, what it's like to sort of work as a player and understand the process of the game. For you, in a dream season, what would a dream season look like for you as either a player or a fan, or maybe even managing some players? What would a dream season in baseball look like for you?
As an individual or a team?
Either one. It's just sort of like, because, you know, dreams, you don't want to like, dreams are sort of limitless, so I don't want to like put it in a box. So whatever you think is the most resonating answer is the best answer.
Well, I mean, personally, we play like, I want to say 50, 55 games a year. We started off 0-7. But I know we have the talent to do it. So I would love for us to bounce back and win the games we're supposed to win, and then win other games we're not supposed to. And then individually, I just want to keep developing. You know, you can put the statistics on yourself, but that's just setting such an expectation that you're not always going to reach. So just, you know, developing, learning a new pitch, learning, you know, throwing that fastball harder than you've ever thrown it. So those are the goals and the dreams for me as of right now.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited just to continue to follow what you're doing. So this podcast is specifically called Voices because I want to make sure the voices of the people that I know and that I meet are put out into the universe so people can appreciate them. So I leave the final word with the guest at all times because I think it's important that their contribution is properly appreciated and that they can bookend both sides of the conversation. So with your final word, you can talk about anything you want to. You can continue with baseball, any personal thing you want, or just anything that's on your heart. But I will say thank you for participating. It's always good talking to you, man. And I will leave the final word to you.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about how, like, everyone always mentions sports are more than a game, and it is. It's where you build relationships. You get that network, and then you grow personally. So whenever you're training or whatever you're doing to get better, you learn so much about yourself. And I mean, I highly recommend it to anybody because it's important. You get that self evaluation, and then you figure out who you are through processes like sports.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I want to give you a little extra bonus. Christian has a fantastic nonprofit initiative that he's working on. And if you want to support him and help him along the way, listen to this next part and then get in contact with him.
I want to start this nonprofit where people can donate used and new sporting goods.
Cool.
So I'm gonna try and like start it through the little league that I played in and have been volunteering in, and kind of expand to like East Casson High School, Mountain Island Charter is close to me, through my university and a couple other places, and try and do. I've been thinking about doing like this high school ambassador program. So get with local high schoolers playing sports and try and get them to get people to donate at their school. And then it also looks good for their resume. I've been thinking about this idea for a couple years, and then I got motivated by it. Last year we were doing an assignment. We went to a local neighborhood in Charlotte that kind of got left behind after all the growth. I believe it's called Lakeview, and it's like a mostly African American community, but there's a lot of, I mean, we met like single mothers with like 5 kids, like 2 had disabilities.
Wow.
And the inspiration was that like all these kids, you hear about sports being like a way out, but there's still a barrier there to even playing recreationally. And then after you sign up recreationally, having the funds to buy cleats, a bat, or whatever sport you're playing.